All right, if we have made it to episode 2, I just want to say thank you so much for all of your love and support and kind words. I literally cannot explain to you the amount of outpouring of love that I've received through comments, through messages, through just the support that I've received. And words cannot even express how appreciative and grateful I am for every single one of you that have listened, tuned in, shared, supported in one way or another, and especially those of you who were vulnerable yourselves and shared with me some of the things you've gone through. I'm thankful for that because that's why I'm doing this. I want to create a community for people who are healing or on a healing journey, who don't have people to support them, or who do but just don't feel comfortable speaking out because they don't think people relate. And I'm here to tell you people do relate. So again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here. I will do a Q&A at the end. People would ask me questions and I'm going to address some of them at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. Don't forget to ask me any questions that you have in the comments, anything you want me to touch on. I am writing this in real time so I can elaborate on things that you guys are interested in understanding further, or I can answer questions in the comments. If you guys have any, just let me know. I'm here to engage with you. And once again, I'm trying to create a community, so don't hesitate to ask me any questions. If you're curious, I will not get offended. I know putting this out there is going to generate a lot of curiosity, and I'm ready to answer any questions you guys might have, and also provide any guidance for any of you guys that are on your own healing journey that feel as if you are alone, or you don't know where to start, or you want some tools, or want to know things that work for me. So I'm an open book. Don't hesitate to reach out or comment or message me, and I will always respond. I found a new place in my home. I figured like this is better so I can look at you guys and I'm sitting like in a more comfortable setting. So we're finding our way. We're finding it. Okay, do you want to give a trigger warning on this episode? Because I do start diving a little bit into what happened to my brother. I don't get into the nitty gritty details. That is in the next episode, but still trigger warning. Anything that is hard to hear, feel free to skip through. I'm also going to be putting it out on Apple Podcasts. If you can't watch this video and you rather just listen, it'll be out on Apple Podcasts as well. Anxiety wasn't just something that I carried. It was a shadow that loomed over my entire family. Each of us bore it in our own way, shaped by the constant fear and unpredictability Everett brought into our home. For my mom, it was the weight of trying to keep the peace, the endless effort to avoid setting him off. For my brothers, it was a mix of confusion, defiance, and survival. And for me, it became a silent, ever-present hum, a reminder that safety was never guaranteed. It wasn't just us who felt the effects of Everett's control. Like so many abusers, he made it his mission to isolate us, cutting my mom off from people who might have been able to help. Slowly, my grandma's house, once my safe haven, became somewhere I wasn't allowed to visit as often. The warmth I felt there, the freedom to just be a kid, started to feel like a distant memory. My grandma knew something was wrong. She saw it in the tension in my mom's voice, in the way we flinched whenever Everett's name came up, and in the bruises on the boys that couldn't always be explained away. My grandma was a no-nonsense type of woman, the kind who didn't mince words or shy away from conflict. She didn't like something, you would know it. And she didn't like Everett. I remember the anger in her eyes whenever she saw those bruises or heard us talk about his punishments. Her frustration was palpable, her love for us fierce and unwavering. She wasn't the type to sit quietly. She tried everything she could to protect us, but Everett's grip on my mom was too strong. It wasn't just my grandma who noticed. My aunts tried to intervene too. They'd ask questions, offer help, but it never seemed to go anywhere. Everett's manipulation ran deep, and my mom was trapped in his grasp, unable or unwilling to break free. I'll never forget overhearing my grandma crying in the kitchen, her voice breaking as she begged my mom to leave him. "You don't have to live like this," she said. "You don't have to put those kids through this." My mom couldn't see a way out. She couldn't see past the fear, the control, the hope that maybe if she stayed, things would somehow get better. And so Everett's hold tightened, not just over her, but over all of us. He cut us off from people who could have been our lifeline. My grandma, my aunts, anyone who might have been able to intervene, they were pushed further and further away. Without that safety net, I felt like there was no escape. The isolation gave Everett free rein to do whatever he wanted, knowing no one could intervene. Even as a child, I could feel the walls closing in, cutting us off from the people who loved us most. Things got really bad, really fast. My grandma could feel it too, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon, and she finally decided to call CPS. I'll never forget the day they came. The house felt colder somehow. Even though the sun was shining through the windows, the air was heavy with tension, the kind that made every sound feel amplified. They interviewed all of us, one by one, each of us taken into a separate room. When the social worker sat me down, her voice was soft, her questions straightforward. "Do you feel safe at home?" she asked. I lied. "Are your siblings safe?" she asked next. I lied again. But when she finally asked, "Is Everett violent towards your mom?" the lie caught in my throat. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They spoke to my mom next, and to my surprise, she admitted that Everett had used physical discipline. Maybe it was her way of trying to protect us, or maybe it was a desperate attempt to lighten his wrath by being honest. Either way, it didn't matter much in the end. The system did what the system so often does. It failed us. Instead of removing us from the danger or holding Everett accountable, they let my mom and Everett off with a warning. They handed them a plan for how to discipline us without being physical, as if a piece of paper could stop the cycle of abuse we were trapped in. Knowing how broken the system is shouldn't have came as a shock. But at the time, I couldn't understand why the people who were supposed to help us just walked away. I told myself I lied to protect my siblings, to keep us together. But the guilt stayed with me. I wondered if things would have been different if I just told the truth. After they left, the air in the house was electric with tension. Everett's silence was more terrifying than his yelling, and my mom walked on eggshells for days, afraid of setting him off again. It was clear nothing had changed. It was clear nothing was going to. If you knew it was coming, you'd be shouting at the pages right now. You'd be screaming that the system is flawed, that it holds the lives of innocent children in its hands, yet more often than not, those hands let them slip through the cracks. You'd be shaking your head, wondering how many times stories like this end in tragedy. And you'd be right, because that's exactly what happens here. But it wasn't just the system that failed me. My father knew. He knew about the abuse, about Everett, about the terror that lived in our house, and he left me there. He didn't fight to take me out of that situation. He didn't shield me or pull me out of the storm. I used to wonder if it was easier for him to walk away, to let me disappear into a life that he didn't have to witness, rather than face what was happening to me. The truth is, I don't know what hurt more. Everett's fists, the system's indifference, or my father's decision to leave me behind. The warning from CPS wasn't a wake-up call for Everett. It was a green light. He learned that as long as his punishments were quiet enough, as long as his threats stayed just out of sight, no one would stop him. The system wasn't coming back to save us. No one was coming back to save us. Looking back, I think my grandma knew. Maybe she didn't know how bad it would get, but she knew enough to keep fighting for us, even when the system wouldn't. She begged my mom to leave and pleaded with her to see what Everett was doing to us. But my mom was trapped in his lies and his control, and in the hope that things might get better. They didn't. They got worse. No one could stop it. No one could step in. And because of that, somebody didn't make it out alive. The room was filled with flowers, their sweet scent clashing with the unbearable heaviness in the air. To this day, I can't stand the smell of flowers, carnations to be exact. It's as if that scent has been forever etched in my memory, tied to this moment, this loss. The cloying sweetness was suffocating, mixing with the weight of grief that hung in the room like a thick fog. I stood there, staring at the casket, trying to make sense of the fact that Jordan was inside. My mom held me close, carrying me around like I was the only thing left in this world she could protect. I clung to her, not because I felt safe with her, but because I didn't know where else to go. I remember understanding enough to know my brother was gone, not enough to cry, or maybe I didn't have any tears left of everything we'd been through. The room was filled with faces, some familiar, many I didn't recognize. To me, they all looked the same, somber, their eyes darting between each other as if silently sharing questions they were too afraid to ask. What did they think happened? I wondered. Did they know what Everett did? Did they know my brother was gone? Did they know what we had to see? The truth was a heavy, unspoken presence in the room, suffocating and undeniable. My mom and Everett were innocent in any of this. She had made choices. Choices that kept us in the orbit of a man who brought nothing but chaos and fear. I wanted to scream at everybody in that room, to tell them what had happened, to make them see the reality we had been living in, but I didn't. I was just a little girl. The words stayed trapped inside me just like everything else. As I stood there in that room, surrounded by flowers, strangers' stares, and the memories began to flood in. It wasn't like Reese's death came out of nowhere. It wasn't sudden or unexpected. It was the result of years of tension and abuse that had been brewing just beneath the surface, ignored by everyone who had the power to stop it. Everett's presence in our life has always been like a ticking time bomb. My mom stayed despite everything, clinging to the hope that things would get better, but they didn't. If anything, they got worse. His anger escalated, his punishments became crueler, and his control over our family tightened like a noose. I remember the weeks leading up to that night. The air in the house felt different, heavier, like it was charged with something unspoken and dangerous. Everett's temper was shorter than usual, and his punishments were harsher. It was as if he was unraveling, losing what little control he pretended to have over himself. Jordan, with his fiery personality and behavioral challenges, often found himself in Everett's crosshairs. My brother was full of life, too much life for a man like Everett to handle. But life didn't seem to matter to Everett. Okay, trigger warning on this next part. I do kind of get into some stuff that's hard to hear. So, not safe for work if you're listening to this out loud and you're in public. I urge you to probably put some headphones on. My poor brother. My poor 9-year-old brother. Beaten to death in his own home. A place that was supposed to be his safe haven. With a family that was supposed to be better than his foster family. As much as I try to forget, I never will. The memories are burned into my mind, vivid and unrelenting. I can still see it. The way Everett, a 6-foot, 225-pound man, punched and kicked 60-pound Jordan, throwing him down the stairs like he was nothing. Jordan screamed, his voice raw and desperate, and I, just a helpless 5-year-old, stood there, wishing I could make it all stop. My ears are ringing, my body is hot as I type this, as though I'm back in that moment, frozen and powerless. And when it was over, he finally stopped. Jordan was resilient. He'd take those whoopings before and somehow always seemed to bounce back. But this time was different. This time, Everett lost his temper completely, beating my brother like he was a grown man. What's crazy is that Jordan did survive, but only for a moment. When my mom came home from work, she noticed something was off. Jordan wasn't himself. His movements were slow, his eyes distant. Jay was sick with the flu at the time, so she assumed that Jordan had caught whatever Jay had. He had a fever, diarrhea, seemed out of it. So she tried to soothe him the best that she could. She ran him a bath, completely unaware of what he had just endured hours earlier. But when she undressed him, everything changed. The bruises covering his body told a story she couldn't ignore. "What's this?" she asked Everett. He admitted it plainly, without hesitation. "I hit him." I don't know how my mom responded at that moment, but I know what came next. Those next moments are burned into my memory, a series of images and sounds that play in a loop in my mind, refusing to fade, even decades later. Panic sets in. She tried to get him to drink water, eat something, but he couldn't. His small body, bruised and broken, was shutting down before her eyes. By the time she realized something was seriously wrong, it was too late. Jordan's body couldn't hold on any longer. Shortly before midnight, a frantic Everett called 911, his voice loud and desperate, yelling over and over, "The boy's not breathing! The boy's not breathing! The boy's not breathing!" Those words spoken by the very man who caused it all haunt me to this day. I was asleep when it all happened, tucked in my bed, unaware of the chaos unfolding just a few feet away. I didn't hear the ambulance arrive or see them carry Jordan out of the house. By the time I woke up, my brother was gone. He was rushed to the hospital, but the damage had been done. About a half hour later, he was pronounced dead. Gone. I don't remember much of the rest about that night. It's all a blur, like trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. But I do remember when my mom came to me, her face pale and broken, her voice shaking, as she woke me up to deliver the words that would change everything. Jordan is gone. Gone. What do you mean, gone? How can my brother, my best friend, my protector, my little firecracker be gone? It didn't feel real. I sat there in silence, unable to cry, unable to process the weight of what those words truly meant. One moment he was here, alive, and now gone. At 5 years old, I didn't understand grief, but I felt its weight pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. The days and weeks after Jordan's death were a blur of grief and confusion. The world seemed to move on, but I felt stuck, as if time had slowed down just for me. And then came the announcement from my teacher. The school was planting a tree in Jordan's honor. It was meant to be a kind gesture, a way to commemorate his life and give the school a lasting reminder of the boy he had been. But for me, felt odd. I remember standing there on the school lawn, surrounded by my classmates, teachers, and parents. Everyone was so somber, their eyes heavy with pity whenever they glanced at me. They all knew Jordan was my brother, and their stares felt like weights pressing down on me, and I hated it. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want to be the center of attention for something so painful. The ceremony itself was short, just a few words about Jordan and his vibrant personality, followed by the planting of a small sapling in the corner of the schoolyard. I stood there, clutching my hands together, trying to shrink into myself as the adults spoke. When they mentioned his name, my stomach twisted. It felt strange hearing them talk about him like they knew him, like they could understand what his loss meant. I wanted to scream that they didn't know. They couldn't possibly understand the hole he had left behind. When it was over, I lingered by the tree for a moment. The sapling looked so fragile, its branches thin and bare. I wondered if it would survive, if it would grow tall and strong, or if it would wither away like everything else seemed to. Standing there, I felt exposed, like my grief had just been put on display for everybody to see. I wanted to run, to hide from their pitying eyes, but I stayed rooted in place, unable to move. A few classmates came over offering quiet condolences or just standing awkwardly nearby. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded, wishing they'd leave me alone. Their words felt empty, their presence intrusive. I didn't want their sympathy. I wanted my brother back. Over time, that tree became a fixture of the schoolyard, a quiet reminder of Jordan's absence. Its branches grew wide and strong, stretching towards the sky. I didn't visit it often, but every time I caught a glimpse of it during recess or on my way to class, it brought me a mix of emotions. Sadness, anger, and a strange kind of pride. Jordan's life had been cut short, but in some way he was still there, rooted in the earth, growing despite everything. Looking back, I can see how that tree symbolized more than just Jordan. It was a reminder how different grief looks for everyone. For the adults, it was a gesture of closure, a way to honor my brother and move forward. For me, it was a spotlight on my pain, a public acknowledgement of something so deeply personal I wasn't ready to share. In that moment, I didn't see the tree as comfort, I saw it as a burden, a marker of loss I was too young to fully understand. Jordan's death didn't just end his life, it shattered my world. The weeks that followed were a blur of confusion and heaviness, emotions too big for a 5-year-old to carry. Even with Everett now gone, facing charges for what he'd done, it didn't feel like justice. It didn't feel like anything had been fixed. His absence didn't erase what he'd done, and it didn't undo the fear and chaos he'd left behind. Jordan's death was Pandora's box. The moment he was taken from me, it unleashed something I couldn't control. Grief, fear, anger, all spilling out and spreading into every corner of my life. It was the first domino in the line of many, setting off a chain reaction of trauma that would define so much of who I become. Okay, so I'm gonna do a quick little Q&A for the people who responded to my Instagram story. What did the person that did it end up being charged with versus what was he convicted with? So I actually start talking about court proceedings and charges versus convictions in the next episode. Fairly early on in the episode, I go into that. But I'll just say that he ended up getting off with significantly lesser charges than what he was originally charged with. But once again, you'll hear all the details next week. Do you forgive the person and do they take accountability? So, don't particularly want the pleasure of having a conversation with him enough to know if he takes accountability. As the story unfolds, you'll get to learn more about how this plays out. And by his actions, starting then to now, in my personal opinion, I would say probably not. Do I forgive him? I would say yes, for myself. Like, I've released the anger towards him for myself. Do I forgive? Yeah. Do I think he's a good person? No. Would I want to sit in the same room as him? Probably not. But if we're talking about this initial incident with my brother, I feel like you'd have to forgive to heal. And I have let go of my anger around that particular situation. Not for him, though, once again, for myself. So that's my answer, I guess. Is there any family that is supportive? So things will make more sense once again as the story plays out. I feel like there's so many layers because there are things that have happened in recent years, and that how the story unfolds, all of this will kind of make sense and kind of piece together as the story comes out and as time goes on. But there is family that's supportive. I would say I have family that doesn't like it necessarily, but they're going to support me. I have family, obviously, that's pissed. In my opinion, the ones that are pissed just because they're not in a space of being healed, and they're not ready to receive my perspective, and they're not ready to, because really when you're unhealed, right, like you see things from an unhealed perspective from where you're sitting. And I feel like you almost lack the ability to see things from where the other person is sitting. A lot of the time when there's trauma involved, you have to take a look at yourself, right? To like see things like, okay, like how did I contribute to this? Where did I go wrong? Where am I at fault? And when you're somebody who's unhealed and you're not willing to see those things with clear eyes, you're going to be upset about someone else speaking on their perspective because you don't see it that way, because you're not healed enough to do so. So they're just not ready to receive it. And, whatever, this is my journey. It's my story. It's my brother's story. So I don't need everyone to support me. I am getting some support from my family. They know who they are. I love them dearly. I appreciate them for the support. And the ones who aren't supporting, hey, I got enough of you guys supporting to make up for all of them times 10 million, probably. So what made you want to do this? So I just was feeling compelled to do it, to help people who aren't supported, who don't feel like they have support, to give people someone to relate to also be a positive role model, and to let people know you don't have to be your story. You have all of the tools in the world to rewrite your narrative. And I want to embody that and create a community that embodies that, and just be a safe space for people, to be honest, that have gone through similar situations, worse situations, that don't know where to start on their journey, or that want to speak out but can't, or aren't vocal enough to do so. Like, there's so many people that have reached out to me, that are listening, that are watching, that need to hear this, whether it's for their perspective, their own healing, or so they feel like they have somebody to relate to. And I wouldn't say more importantly, but another big reason is because my brother's story deserves to be heard, period. This is a case that back in the day, we didn't have the media coverage that we have now. And I look at cases that I feel like you are similar in some aspect, like Casey Anthony, like Gabriel Fernandez. And yes, I would compare it to those. Nobody knows about it. And my brother didn't get justice, in my opinion. And for me, that doesn't sit right with me. I want to rewrite the end of his story and let it be a positive legacy, that his story is helping people. I don't want his story to end the way that it did. So that's another big part of it as well. Feelings with my mom then and now. Am I angry? Do I understand her or forgive her? In a sense, I understand her because, as you guys will find out as well as the story goes on, I've been in my own fair share of toxic and abusive situations, unfortunately. So I do understand to an extent. However, just because you understand doesn't mean you have to tolerate, right? Like, that's kind of my feelings behind it. It probably doesn't make sense to you guys right now because, once again, there's so much of the story that transpires after my brother passes that will make sense as the story goes on. So I can't answer that on to be frank right now without giving so many things away. And I want you guys to be able to follow along the story in a timeline that makes sense that you can receive. Like I said, I feel like it's important to forgive everybody. I'd like to say that I've forgiven her, but there's just things that have transpired that are, I mean, to be honest, fresh. So just a very complex question to answer. I feel like this will get answered if you keep listening, and I'll touch back on it when I feel like we're at a point where I can revisit it without giving things away. So sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. How long will this series be? That's unknown. So I do plan to give you guys everything. What happened after, even down to my adult life. I really want to show the impact of the work that I've done on myself, connect the dots of how childhood trauma translates into adulthood. And I can't connect those dots without giving you the full timeline. Now, obviously, like, I'm not going to keep you guys on this. I'm not going to drag the story out to like a 2-year-long episode. Like, I'm going to leave out what's not important and keep in what is. But the point is, I don't know how long the series will be because it just depends on when the story ends, depending on what I decide to put in and what I don't decide to put in. So definitely, stay along for the ride. It gets interesting. It gets dicey. I talk to people all the time and like, your life's a movie. And I'm like, babe, buckle the fuck up. Because it gets dicey. And a lot of that has to do with some of my own choices. So we'll tap into that as well. What are some tools you recommend for someone just beginning to unpack childhood trauma? First of all, and I mean this with all due respect, if you rely on any substance, weed, alcohol, if you can, take a break, clear your mind. Because one of the best things that I've done, and granted it's been a short period of time since I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking a long time ago, like it's been years and years and years and years. I see things much clearer, I've noticed, when I was drinking versus when I'm not. And I go to therapy. I recommend therapy really for everybody. I feel like therapy is like, I watch this one podcast and she's always like, therapy is like getting a tune-up for your car. And I agree. I feel like even if, you haven't experienced something significantly traumatic, I feel like everyone could use somebody to hold them accountable that is an outside person, that is unbiased, that can let you know what you're doing is unhealthy or healthy. And I think that every person on the earth can benefit from that, especially if you're somebody who's carrying something very heavy. We can't unpack everything alone. You can be as self-aware as possible. And it's very hard to do the work alone. So I would say if you have that resource available to you, I would tap in, because me going to therapy has helped me tremendously. And I mean, around everything. I can ask her for advice. I can be like, hey, I have this tendency and I think that it's toxic. What tools? And having that resource available to me has helped me significantly. So if you're somebody who's struggling, if you're somebody who's looking to be on a healing journey, I will 10 out of 10 recommend get yourself a therapist. And then another thing is get active. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. Healthy body typically equals healthy mind. You don't have to get in the gym 5 days a week like me. You can go on a walk every day. You can go on a run. You can lift. You can do yoga. You can just get up and moving. And I mean that. Physical activity helps with your mind and how you process things. It's scientifically proven. So tap into that as well. And then I'd also say, get it out. Get it out. This is my form of getting it out. Being in therapy is my form of getting it out. If you're not comfortable with that, write it down. Get a journal. Talk yourself through it. I feel like that helps significantly as well. And watch who you surround yourself with, because, I have a great circle of friends who want what's best for me. And I could go to any one of them at any time and they're there for me. Now, there's pros and cons to that, right? Because sometimes I'm dependent on them. And that's something that I'm working through in therapy, because ultimately you need to be your own sounding board, right? You need to be able to facilitate your feelings on your own. And it's great to have a support system, and it's great to have the right support system that's going to tell you, hey, I don't know about those decisions. Hey, you're drinking a little too much. Hey, this is unhealthy. The friends that are encouraging the toxic behaviors are not your friends. And I think learning that and watching who you're surrounding yourself with and giving your time to is a big part of it as well. So, just some tidbits. Obviously, I don't have all the sauce. I got some sauce, a little sprinkle of sauce, but I don't have all the sauce. I have what's worked for me, and I have what I know. And I'm willing to talk to any of you guys any time of the day if you need somebody to talk to. I know not everyone's blessed with a support system like mine. I do have so many people in my corner, and I know everyone doesn't. So I'm in your corner, though, if you need somebody. And I think that's all I have, to be honest. Yeah, that's all I have. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Shoot me a message. My ears and eyes are always open. I love interacting with all of you guys. And again, I keep saying it, and I'll keep saying it till I'm blue in the face. You guys do not understand how truly blessed and appreciative I am. I was sitting here reading all of your messages and comments and literally sobbing. Literally sobbing. So thank you for that. And yeah, I just can't believe how much support I've been getting. And it means the world, because, people who were at one point the closest people to me, I don't even have a relationship with now. And it's kind of a hard pill to swallow. But like I said in my reel that I had posted the other day, 2025 is about shifting perspective. So I can sit here and cry about who I don't have in my corner, but I'd rather choose to see who I do and be grateful and blessed that I'm surrounded by so many people who want to see me win, and so many people who are watching me and rooting for me and supporting me. And it's people who I haven't even talked to since I was in elementary school. It's crazy to me. It's crazy to me. And I can't thank you guys enough. And I guess I'll stop saying thank you now. I don't know. I've said it a million times, but seriously, I love y'all. Thank you. I just said I was going to stop that. Sorry. And you guys have a great weekend, and I will be posting the episodes from this point forward on Thursdays. I know that won my poll when I put that out there. So Thursdays at 7, we will have new episodes. So yeah, until Thursday.